Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth session in American English Live Teacher Development Series 4. My name is Lauren, and I'll be with you today along with my colleague behind the scenes, Heather, who will be serving as moderator to help answer your questions and respond to your comments during the session. Today, our host Kate will be talking with our presenter, Eric Wenninger, about how to effectively integrate graphic organizers into student-centered speaking and writing activities. So let's get started.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kate. Welcome to the fourth session of American English Live Series 4. We're so happy to have you here with us today. We're excited to learn about using graphic organizers to promote academic language production. So we hope you're ready with all of your questions and comments, and we're looking forward to seeing them and sharing them. As always, we'd like to extend a warm welcome to our first-time viewers. If this is your first time with us, please let us know. And if you can remember how many times you've been with us, if you've been to lots of webinars with us and lots of American English Live events, please let us know how many you have attended or maybe how many digital badges you have received. It's great to be with you all. Let's start with these photos from the Youth English Corner in Zanzibar, Tanzania, which recently hosted a viewing group session for American English Live 4.3, the one we had a couple of weeks ago with presenter Joe McVeigh. And they also hosted a certificate ceremony for American English Live Series 3 participants. Thank you so much for sending in these photos. So the Regional English Language Officer in Central and East Africa, George Chinnery, helped awards certificates to 66 educators. Congratulations to all of you. Amazing work. We love to see teachers learning and sharing ideas as they view the American English Live or as they celebrate or discuss it. So please send in your photos to the email there on your screen, americanenglishwebinars@elprograms.org, or tag us on social media so that we can see them at American English for Educators or using the hashtag American English. We may feature one of your photos in one of our upcoming sessions. So our presentations for this series are on the topics of increasing learner motivation, content-based instruction, and communicative grammar teaching. Today is our fourth session in Series 4, and after today we have 2 more sessions in this series about grammar teaching, and we hope that you'll be able to join us for both. So here's a little bit about what to expect in today's session. Each session is approximately 60 minutes long and is often related to an American English e-teacher massive open online course or a Teacher's Corner theme on our Facebook page or on our website. The presenter will present the material, and I, as your host, will also ask questions and make comments. But we really hope to hear from you. So please share your ideas, comments, questions in the comments or the chat box, and we hope to address them as much as we can during today's session. When our session comes to a close in about an hour, you will have an opportunity to receive a digital badge for your participation. We're going to send a link or share a link with everyone that will have 3 questions on it. So just complete that short quiz, and if you answer 2 out of 3 multiple choice questions correctly, you will successfully pass the quiz and be eligible to receive a digital badge via email within about a week. The email address that you will receive it from is badger@badger.io. So make sure you're looking for that, and also make sure that you are checking your spam and junk folders just in case. There are over 18,000 participants already registered for our current American English e-teacher massive open online course, content-based instruction. So thank you so much to all who have already registered. We're really excited about this course. It began on Monday, February 18th, and it'll run until March 25th. Registration closes on March 1st, so if you haven't registered already, we hope that you will, and we'd love to see you there. This course is designed for teachers who are teaching or preparing to teach content-based instruction classes, or even if you're just interested in learning more about this topic, please join us. As you remember, this was the topic of our webinar a couple of weeks ago, And our presenter, Eric, today will be talking about how to use graphic organizers to scaffold English instruction in a content-based thematic unit or a content-based course. All right, so now for today's session, using graphic organizers to promote students' academic language production. In the content-based English classroom, students study difficult concepts. Oftentimes, however, there is little opportunity for students to talk or write about these concepts. Instead, students might sit passively in their seats. This session will introduce the graphic organizer as a tool to help students understand difficult concepts and produce related, meaningful academic English. Participants will learn how to effectively integrate graphic organizers into their instruction as part of student-centered speaking and writing activities. The result will be more engaged students who are able to effectively speak and write about the content areas they are studying. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Eric Wenninger. Eric is a language education consultant specializing in content-based English instructional techniques. He served 2 years as a U.S. Department of State English Language Fellow in Vietnam, where he taught professional English skills to government officials and mentored English teachers. Eric received his Master of Education degree in Second Languages and Cultures from the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, and his professional interests include working with multi-level classes, designing and delivering content-based English instruction, and blending technology with teaching. Welcome, Eric. We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks for having me. Very happy to be here with you all to talk about something I'm very passionate about, graphic organizers, and using them with our students to help them become better speakers and better writers. So as Kate mentioned, I've been teaching English for a number of years with all different levels and in many different subject areas. So I'm really looking forward to this time that we have together.
Great.
Good. To begin, I have a couple questions for the audience. How do you help your students understand difficult concepts and vocabulary in your classroom?
All right. Yeah, we want to hear from you, everyone. When you have difficult concepts or vocabulary, how do you help your students understand that? Let's see, I see from Huma that she uses examples and pictures. What else? What other ways that do you help your students understand difficult concepts and vocabulary? Let's see, using realia. Osgur says helping with visuals. Kenjay says pictures. Gustavo says drawings and body language. Let's see, Amina says sometimes she uses the first language. Pat says using images and examples. So great, wonderful responses, everybody.
Yeah, these are all great things, right? We support our students in many ways. So the next question, what percentage of your class time is devoted to students actively practicing speaking or writing? What do you think?
Great, yeah. So out of the 100% of your class time, what percentage of that class time is used on speaking and writing? What do you think, everyone? Let's see, Mikel says 40%. Huma says 50%. What percentage of your class time is devoted to students actively practicing speaking and listening? Let's see, 60%, or it depends from Miriam. Great.
Wow, yeah.
Niaz says 75%. Great, wonderful responses, everyone.
Yeah, and so why I've asked these two questions is because I think it really targets us on some problems that we might have in any class setting. One, are students getting the support they need to be successful? And two, are students getting the amount of time they need to practice to be successful? So these are some things that we're going to look at in this presentation during our time together. So to start out, I wanted to give you guys an activity to just illustrate a point. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you two slides. What you're seeing is the first slide. You'll see it's talking about street art. And when I show you these two slides, I want you to tell me which one is easier to understand. So I'm going to give you a few seconds just to look this over, maybe this definition, try to find some keywords or a main idea It's a definition of street art.
All right, we're going to give you a few seconds here and take a look at this definition of street art and think about what might be the main idea here in this definition. We'll give you about 10 more seconds to read it through.
Good.
All right, hopefully you got a chance to take a look at it.
Yeah, so now we'll go to the next slide. So this is our second slide. So right away, as you're looking at this second slide, I'll ask, which one was easier, the first or the second? Which one was easier to understand?
Great. So which of those two slides was the easiest to understand and why? Maybe you can give us some ideas as to why you think the first or the second was easier to understand. Let's see. I see a lot of people saying second, that the second one was easier to understand. Gustavo says because of how the art is expressed. Yeah, why else? What other reasons do you think the second one might have? It looks like everybody pretty much agrees that the second one is easier to understand.
Yep, I'm seeing that too. Yeah, so as you pointed out, there's a picture that goes along with it, a little diagram showing what street art is, and also some brief bullet points that help us understand, right? It's publicly displayed art. It's displayed in the community. So good job, everyone. So what this is getting at really is that visuals support us. So when we're dealing with difficult concepts, as we do in content-based English instruction, academic language, we need some supports to help us along the way. So very good. We can go into the next slide. All right, so what this leads us to is our essential question of the day. How do we get students to speak and write about challenging academic topics in a non-native language? So what are your thoughts, everyone? How do we do this?
Yeah, everyone, what do you think? How do we get students to speak and write about challenging topics when our topics are not in their native language? The topics are in English. Visual support from Saida. Let's see. What else do you think?
Exactly, that's what we just talked about. Good.
Good. Huma says brainstorming. Raymond says personalizing the topic. Great idea. Scaffolding tasks from Kenye. I think maybe he's on to some future part of the presentation.
Yeah, he's on to something there.
Let's see. Pat Salgado says planning the topic and sharing the main ideas. I think they might be on to something too. Great ideas, everyone.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, so as you mentioned, how I would answer this question is we need to make learning visual and we need to provide opportunities for practice. So throughout the session, these are some of the things I want you to keep in mind. How are we making our learning visual and what opportunities are we providing our students? And I hope that they're your takeaways after today's session is done. All right, so to get more into an overview, what our goals are today, we'll discuss the challenges that go along with academic language or with students learning academic language in a content-based English classroom. I think it's important to acknowledge that academic language doesn't necessarily mean higher education or at the university level. It can mean any grade level language that students are learning or language of school. So for example, my mom is a kindergarten teacher. She works with 5-year-olds. Those 5-year-olds need to know academic language of kindergarten. My dad, on the other hand, is a high school teacher. He works with 18-year-olds. And they too need to learn the academic language that goes along with their age group. So we're looking at a pretty broad definition of academic or school-related language. Okay, so then the second thing we're going to talk about is how we can use graphic organizers to scaffold or to support instruction. And then finally, we'll look at speaking and writing activities. That's where I hope we'll spend most of our time. And how students can use graphic organizers or how teachers can use graphic organizers with their students to help them produce academic language.
Sounds great. I think we're going to learn a lot today.
Yes, I hope so. All right, so before we get started with the activities, I wanted to take a closer look at academic language. So let's start here at the bottom of this diagram. What we're looking at is social language. So this is language we might use having conversations with friends. On the left, you have context embedded. That means there is a context. And on the right, we have context reduced, which means there's no familiarity. There's maybe not a context that people are aware of. So if you look at those examples, face-to-face conversation, right? We have visual cues, there's body language, maybe familiarity with the situation. That would go on the left side with the context. On the right side, a phone conversation, right? We're taking away that visual support. We're taking away the body language or awareness of a situation. That might be a little bit more difficult, as some of you have experienced talking on the phone. As we go up on this diagram, we get into academic language or higher level of thinking language. So on the left, if we look at an example with a context, if you're a science teacher and you do a science demonstration for your students, and then you have them explain the demonstration, well, they have a context, but the language might be a little bit more difficult for them. On the other hand, if you go to the right-hand side, if you have your students defend an argument, again, we have academic language, but it might be a new idea or something that's unfamiliar. They haven't seen it before. And so it might be a little bit more difficult. So I'm kind of getting to this, but what I want you guys to do now is to look at which one do you think is the most difficult of these 4 language tasks?
All right, everyone, which one do you think is the most difficult? And if you want to share a reason why, we would love to hear that as well. Let's see. Humeria says defending an argument. Uzgur says defending an argument for sure. Which one of these do you think is the most difficult and why? Hatice says the phone conversation is pretty difficult. Sometimes I do think it's difficult in a new language to really understand over the phone. That can be really hard without those visual cues and the context of being in person. Let's see. Carmen says defending an argument. I see a lot of people saying defending an argument. Noreen as well. Great.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think while all of these could be difficult tasks depending on your level, I think defending an argument is what we're trying to see as the most difficult, because there's not a context and it takes a lot of academic language. Very good. So what we want to do as teachers is we want to scaffold our instruction. And what this means is we're going to support our students to get from social language to higher academic language. And sometimes we also want to help them contextualize their environment. So giving them some familiarity. In other words, taking them from when the context is reduced, we want to help them understand that context a little bit better. So this is what our goal is as teachers, is we want to scaffold our instruction so that students can understand. And I think graphic organizers can really help us here. So if we look at a quick definition of graphic organizers, some things that might jump out to you is that they're visual. We've talked about that already. If we look at what academic language is, there are many ideas, relationships, there's academic vocabulary and even specific grammar that we need to use. And then it also is something that helps us engage our students, right? Providing a visual helps get students more involved. It's more hands-on when we're looking at these content area topics. But what I want maybe more helpful than this is to look at some examples. So these are some examples. You may have seen some of these. They might look familiar. We have the Venn diagram, as well as some others, the word web. These are just some that I selected and that some of them we'll look at in this session. But I'm wondering, what other graphic organizers are you guys familiar with?
Yeah, what do you think, everyone? Which graphic organizers have you used in class? Maybe some that are here on this slide, or others that are not on this slide that you have created or that you have used from another resource. Let's see, Brenda says mind maps. Humera says flowcharts. Ramon, brainstorming. Noreen says the Venn diagram.
Yes.
Great. Carla also says the Venn diagram. Flowcharts from Kiran. Shu Hua says that they use this in reading and writing.
Very
Patrick,
good.
the concept map and the T-chart. And Carmen says she uses a lot of outlines and diagrams from Huda. So great ideas, everybody.
Yeah, these are all great. And what it really gets to is something that I like about graphic organizers is that they're flexible. And I mean, in many different ways. You can use them with beginning students all the way to advanced. You can use them in all different kinds of learning environments, as we'll see here in a little bit. As members of the audience pointed out, all 4 language skills, we can use them. And then all phases of a lesson too, so we can use them to introduce topics as well as assess them. So flexibility is something that is really, really important and beneficial for our use of graphic organizers. All right, so let's look a little bit closer at scaffolding. Okay, so graphic organizers, if they're going to help us scaffold our instruction or support our language learners, what does that process look like? Okay, well, from the beginning, it's an all teacher or a planning phase, right? So when you're thinking about your lessons with your students, one of the things that's helpful is to begin with the end in mind. What are your goals for your students? What do you want them to accomplish? And once you do that, then you can start to think about content and language objectives. The session earlier this month with Joe McVeigh looked at this a little bit more with content-based English teachers or teaching. And we'll look at it again too in the activities that we talk about today.
Great. And by scaffolding, you're talking about ways to really intentionally support students' understanding. Is that right?
That's right, yes. As we go from the more social language to academic language that requires maybe a lot more thinking.
Great.
So as we move up the ladder, the next step is mostly teachers. So now we're giving a little bit more responsibility to students. And this is the input phase. This is where I usually, I introduce the graphic organizer and I start to model to students how to use it. And I do that in several ways. One way you can do it is through a lecture, giving students a lecture. Another is through showing them a video or having them do a reading. But the key is that you're modeling how they're going to use the graphic organizer. And again, we'll look at some examples in a little bit. Third up the ladder, now this is really the critical phase that I think it's really important to incorporate into our lessons, and that's mostly students or guided practice. This is where students need to do something. If you remember from our pre-session reading, the Cult of Pedagogy article, it talked about several different ways that you can make students or have students be active in your class. As this relates to graphic organizers, students are using the graphic organizer to practice reading and writing. Also speaking and listening, or speaking and writing. Also reading and listening, we can use it too. But we'll focus on speaking and writing in this session. And then finally, when you get up to the 4th phase, this is now all the students. Now the responsibility is all on the students. Hopefully they've learned the skills that we're teaching them, and they maybe have a chance to produce something. This could be a test, but it also could be a project, a piece of writing, a video, anything that we can now assess to see that they've learned the skills and the knowledge that we're teaching them. So we can see with the scaffolding process, right, we've gone from all of the responsibility is on the teacher to all of the responsibility is on the student. And that's the basic process that we're going to walk through with our examples, and we're going to see how we can use graphic organizers throughout.
This is wonderful. It's so clear to see how you can start with that intentional planning phase that's all teacher, all the way to bringing students to autonomy and to being able to do the work on their own. So this is great and a really wonderful visual. So thanks so much, Eric.
Great.
And I just want to make a quick reminder to everyone that the slides like this one and the slides before it are all going to be available on the American English NING, AmericanEnglishWebinars.com, and on our website, AmericanEnglish.state.gov. So you can see all of this great content and be able to use it as a resource in the future.
Awesome. So let's look at some activities. So you'll see here we have thematic units. So now when we think about content-based English teaching, one of the things that we think about are content areas, right? So science, math, history. But what if you're a language teacher, an English teacher, as many of you are, and you don't have any content area that you're teaching? Well, you can still do content-based instruction. All you need to do is choose a theme, and that becomes your content. So we'll take a look at an example of a thematic unit. All of these examples, by the way, are things that I've done with my students in my classrooms over the years. So when I was an English teacher of a beginning level student, beginning level class, one of the themes that we talked about was community. And so I had a couple different end goals, but here's one of them. Students can differentiate between places and activities in their neighborhood and in their community. So this is a concept that I wanted my students to understand. So from this now, I could develop my content objectives. Now this is again the planning stage, right? This is what I'm starting to prepare my lessons. So the content objectives, the things that I wanted my students to be able to do were to identify places in their neighborhood and in their community, and also to describe activities that they do in their neighborhood and in their community. And so that was the content that I chose for my English class, right? All focused on community and the neighborhood. And from these now I developed my language objectives. Okay, so here I'm focusing on the language, right? So verbs and nouns associated with neighborhood and community. My focus on verbs, I wanted to differentiate between first person, I have, and third person, he has or she has. And I wanted my students to compare themselves with a classmate as they maybe talked and wrote about this content. So again, this is the planning phase. So once I did this, I was ready to choose my graphic organizer. So let's see what that is. Okay, now this is something that I just invented. It's very simple, right? It circles on a page. But I thought this would be a good idea for developing this concept with my students. So to introduce this graphic organizer, I just drew these circles on a whiteboard. You could draw them on a chalkboard or display them however you like. And then what I did with my students is I talked through some pictures, right? And as I talked through the pictures of my neighborhood and my community, I had them make some notes. And I also modeled this in front of the classroom. So let's see what those notes are. Okay, now some of you guys, some of you might have already anticipated, right? We're going from smaller to bigger. And that's what I wanted to show to my students. So we start from my house and even my street and maybe my yard, right? The smallest. And then we get a little bit bigger, my neighborhood, the streets and surrounding blocks in my neighborhood. And then finally the community, right? My community in Wisconsin, in Wausau, Wisconsin is 50,000 people, so it's a little bigger. And then finally, I would put state, but Wisconsin, right? So not everyone lives in a state. Other people live in countries and districts. And so you could put whatever you wanted, right? Remember, this is flexible. So this is what I started out with my students, and I modeled it, and then I use it with them, and I have them use it to support the speaking and writing activities that I do later.
Great. We have a comment from Granada in Nicaragua, and they say, I started this type of lesson with students, and they completed a map of their bedroom, the house, and then their neighborhood. So they started in an even smaller context. So great example.
Absolutely.
And then I have a quick question from Ataula. So is this graphic organizer used by the teacher or the student?
That's a great question. So when I introduce it to the students, I'm using it, and then my students take it in their notes and they use it. And I don't just use it one day, I use it over the course of maybe a 2-week unit. And so I might start off every class drawing these circles on the board and having my students tell me, what goes in the circles. So absolutely, everyone is using this graphic organizer, and you can use it more than once. It's not a one-time thing.
Great. But when you used it at first, you were using it sort of, Eric, in that second stage where you're giving the input to the students.
Exactly. Yeah. So
and
this
they
is
see it and might
more the
take
input.
notes.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Great.
Yeah. So this is more the input phase, right? So the phase that comes next, what phase comes next?
Oh, mostly student or something, I think, number 3.
Yeah. Yep, good. Mostly student or output phase or guided practice. We'll call
Okay,
it.
good.
Guided practice. So these are our activities that we can use with students. Okay, a very simple one that I like to use with my students is the think, pair, share. So as you can see on the left, we got our students, our people, and on the right, some of the steps. So we start off with just one person, right? So there they have their graphic organizer, and they think to themselves. They may make notes, they may talk to themselves to practice. And then when they're ready, they partner up, right? So they get with a partner and they share their ideas with a partner. And then finally, they might share their ideas with the whole class. And so you go from a low pressure environment, right? Just thinking to yourself, to more of a high pressure environment, speaking in front of the whole class. And then there's a lot of opportunities to repeat along the way. So how I use this with my example, right, is that this activity is that they have their graphic organizer, right, going from smaller to bigger. And then I give them some questions. So in this case, they can use their graphic organizer as a reference and ask them, what do you have in your neighborhood? Or where do you go in your community? And then they can talk to themselves or write to themselves, talk with a partner, and then share the responses with the whole class. So it's a very simple, quick activity that you can incorporate at different points to the lesson. And the graphic organizer is supporting.
Wonderful. Yeah. I see a lot of people commenting that they use the think, pair, share strategy. And I think one thing that's really great about this is that it really you can really see the scaffolding take place sort of directly in this activity where students are first required just to be alone and thinking on their own. And then by the time they get to that higher pressure situation, they've talked about it so much and thought about it so much that it might be easier for them to produce more language in front of everyone. So this is great.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, that's exactly it. This activity then, it blends real well into our next activity, which is a class mingle. So this, again, we can start with an individual, go to a partner, or go to a whole class scenario. But what I do is I have my students now write a quick table in their notes. On the left-hand column, you see my name, Eric, and then below other students in my class. And I do this with my students too. And then 2 columns, neighborhood and community. So now I might have them go about the class and ask each other the same questions. This could be after the think, pair, share, or it could be a different day as well. And then students make notes on this table. And so you can see what's in my neighborhood, what's in my community, and then one of my students, what's in her neighborhood and what's in her community. And you may notice here now that we have the concepts, right? Neighborhood and community. And we're also bringing in some of those language objectives, right? I'm writing down places in my neighborhood and in my community. And then what happens with these two is it provides a really good next step in having a writing extension. So I'll often have my students then, after they've talked with their classmates, write out a few sentences. So in this example, right, in my neighborhood, I have a park and a school, and my has a gas station and a restaurant. So I'm using the language of neighborhood and communities. And if you notice too, I'm differentiating between verb forms, I have and my has. So these link back to my language objectives, and they're things that now I can assess my students to see if they know.
Great. Let's see, I have a couple questions here. Talib is asking, is this graphic organizer used, or which level is this graphic organizer used for?
Yeah, great. So I used it in a beginning class, but you could use it in an intermediate class or a more advanced class, right? Here we have maybe beginning level language, but you could modify this task to make it something that's a little bit harder and more challenging to students, depending on the vocabulary.
Great. And Daniel Kiza is suggesting that it seems like we need to lead them by showing a sample first. And I know you mentioned that before. How much do you usually have to model using a graphic organizer before students are comfortable using it on their own?
It's just, again, that ladder diagram. In the beginning, I model it for them a lot. And then as we go through the unit, as I'm writing up on the board, I give them less and less support and try to turn it more and more over to them. So it really depends on the students. And that's why knowing your students is really important.
Great. And then one other interesting question from Nyak Lu. How do you make sure that students are using the target language? So she's asking, what if you give this activity to the students and they just start using their first language the whole time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that gets back to the rules that you have in your class, the stipulations, and just communicating what your expectations are to students. I am okay with students using their native language, especially if they're trying to help understand a concept that they don't understand. But when I want them to practice English, then we stick into that language. But again, it depends on the students and depends on what your goals are. Okay? But I'd say when we're focused on the language objectives, that's when we really want to try to keep students in the language.
Sounds good, thanks.
So one of the things that I want you to realize, if we go to the next slide, is that all of these graphic organizers, because they're on paper, they have limitations, right? We just have one sheet of paper, and with limitations, we don't see everything, right? So some things are missing, and it's important to realize this so that we can discuss it with our students, right? And we remember that graphic organizers, they're a support. They're not the answer. They're not the answer to everything, right? They're just a support and a step to help us, help our students understand. So some limitations here, for example, might be social media. Like where does that fit in, right? I use social media for in my neighborhood to communicate with people in my neighborhood, and then also in other countries, right? Like Vietnam or like what we're doing now. Another limitation might be someone's second home. Not some students, right? They might live in two different places, so they have two different neighborhoods, and so you might need to give them two graphic organizers. So it's important to realize this with students, and it helps the discussion, and it helps you as a teacher be flexible and help it helps your students think critically about these topics as well.
Great. So one of the main points I think you're making here, Eric, is that even with graphic organizers, we need to allow them to be flexible and to allow students to come up with their own creative ideas, no matter if there are lines and things like that. We can let them think outside of the box. So
right.
When you're making a graphic organizer or using a graphic organizer, you don't have to think this answer has to go here and this answer has to go here, but maybe your students will come up with some new or alternative ways of thinking about something that might fit perfectly in the graphic organizer, but might not, but that you can allow for that. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Exactly, right? Even as somebody pointed out already, right? What about the rooms inside the house, right? So that's an addition that we could put. So there's no really right or wrong answer, and we want to encourage our students to be creative and think critically, as you said, Kate. That's exactly right.
Sounds good.
Great. So our next example are the content areas, right? So remember, we talked about science, math, social studies, history. These are what we're talking about when we're talking about content areas. And as an English teacher, you may have an opportunity to co-teach with a science teacher or a math teacher. I've done that in the past. Or you might be teaching a science class to students who are learning English also. So then you have that double focus, right? They're trying to learn science and they're trying to learn English. And this next example was for an intermediate class that I taught, and that's exactly what we had. It was an earth science class, so they're trying to learn earth science concepts. That was the content. And then from there, we're trying to get language objectives. So this is an example of an end goal, right? So again, I'm in my planning phase. Students can use scientific language to explain why people on the earth experience seasons. So I start with my content objectives, and then I get some language objectives too. So let's look at what those are. So on the left, right, you can see our content objectives. We want to demonstrate that the earth is tilted, and that it's tilted on its axis and it revolves around the sun. So that's one of the concepts of why we have seasons. And so then the second thing, I want my students to explain Earth's position relative to the sun and the season that it's experienced in the northern and southern hemisphere. So maybe you all have learned this before and you can describe it. Maybe you're not as familiar with it, but this is what my goals, these are what my goals were for my students. And from that, I'm getting my language objectives. So for example, axis, tilted, hemisphere. These are all science vocabulary words that we're trying to focus on, and I want my students to practice. We also have prepositions, right? The sun is tilted towards the sun, or sorry, the earth is tilted towards the sun, or it's tilted away from the sun. And so these are the things, these go together, and they're things that I can assess.
Great. So on the content side, we have those concepts and ideas that we want our students to be familiar with. And on the language side, we're focusing on how students can show us in English, in this case, in our case, how they can show us in English that they understand those concepts. So great,
Exactly.
Very clear. Thanks.
All right, so then the next step, right, is we're looking at a graphic organizer. What graphic organizer can we use? You may have seen this one. This is what I would call a seasons diagram. I just got this out of a textbook that I was working in. And I think it highlights the point that sometimes there are diagrams in books, and all we need to do is bring them out, write them on the board, have students write them in their notebook, or give them to students as a handout, because it allows them to take notes, and it allows them to use the graphic organizer for speaking and writing activities. So again, what I would do with this one is give more of a demonstration to students. So I had a sun, and then in the center of the room. And then what I did is I took an orange, I painted it blue to represent the earth. I put a pencil through it to represent the axis. I tilted it. And then I walked around the room and put that orange in different positions relative to the sun, and had students, I quizzed students, do you know what season this would be? And as we went about that process, I put this diagram on the board, and we made notes describing and labeling each of the positions. So while this, if you just put this on here, it looks maybe a little bit complicated. As you go position by position, you're adding that knowledge and you're building that knowledge for students. They're taking notes. We're showing them the model. And so it's a really good way to introduce this concept to students and to introduce this graphic organizer as they take notes.
Great. And I like how you integrated sort of the active, like moving around the class and things like that, and then had students take that concept and put it down on paper for that input stage. So great, wonderful ideas.
Right. And so again, once you introduce this to students and you model it, I would use it over the course of the next couple of days, or however long I'm talking about this topic. I could use this graphic organizer with students. And one of the activities that I do is sorting. And so what I'll do is I'll cut up the graphic organizer, right? Just take a simple scissors and cut it up. Usually I give students, I do this for students, but you don't have to, you can have the students do it too. But I don't cut up their notes. I don't cut up their graphic organizer. But what this does is this gives students the opportunity to manipulate and to move the cards. And so as they're working, I would have students work in maybe groups of 4, or it could be a partnered activity. It could be individual too. It's all up to you as a teacher what you want them to do. But if I'm working with groups of 4, I would have the 4 students work together to put together the diagram, right? Not looking at their notes. Now, and then when they have it done, they could check their notes. They could use it as a key. But what this allows me to do as a teacher too is to walk around and to assess: are my students are they understanding these concepts? Are they understanding the content? Are the positions right? So it gives me that opportunity to assess and check in with individual students and groups. And it also gives students the opportunity to talk about it, right? So they may disagree. They may not be all on the same page as to which one is summer and which one is fall. And it gives them a chance to talk about it and to negotiate that with one another. So I find it's really good opportunity when they can move things to get that practice.
Great. And we have a great question from Humera. She's asking, do you complete the diagram together in this sorting exercise, or do they read something beforehand?
Yeah, so after I've introduced the graphic organizer, I would have the students just do this. So they would put it together. So this is the guided practice phase. And this is a chance for them to do it. And I can give them help if needed.
Great. And also I was thinking as well about this activity, and this is a great way when you're walking around the room and monitoring the students, it's a really neat opportunity for you to assess their content knowledge and their language, because if they're working in pairs, you can kind of listen in and see, are they using the target language or not? And if they are, how much of it are they able to produce and how correctly and all that kind of thing. Yes. So it's a great assessment tool as well for both content and language.
Right, and if they're in the native language, you can just remind them to speak in the target language, to speak in English. And it's a good opportunity for you to do that as a teacher too. So one of the activities I do after this one, and this may again be in the same lesson or a different lesson to reinforce and give students a chance to practice, is I'll have them partner up. So you see the guy on the right has the graphic organizer, our seasons diagram, and the person on the left is describing it, right? So they might describe all of the seasons and the positions. And this is something that we've modeled already. And now again, they're getting a chance to practice. And what I want to highlight here is that this is a good opportunity for studying, for practicing, and then also for you as a teacher to differentiate. So one way you could make this activity harder is to have the person holding the graphic organizer flip it over. And now that person is quizzing the other person, right? And checking their answer, say, no, you're wrong there, or they can give them feedback as the person is trying to describe the different seasons. One way to make it easier then, of course, they can look at the diagram, but another way is to give them talking frames. So usually I would write this on the board, and it's just giving students a frame to get them started. So when the Earth is tilted towards the sun, then we have summer in the Northern Hemisphere. So I still want them to generate the vocabulary that I'm looking for and to check their understanding, but I give them a little frame to get them started.
Great. We have a lot of neat questions and comments coming in from the audience. Let's see, Granada suggests that you could follow this with a student survey about what students' favorite season is and why, which is a great extension activity. Yes. Let's see, Nakib is asking, how much time should be given to completing the graphic organizer? Or how much time do you usually spend on this particular activity?
On this activity, I would take maybe, depends, 10 minutes per student to talk through and describe the graphic organizer. But keep in mind, at this practice point, we've already looked at the graphic organizer quite a bit as a class. Mm-hmm. So that would take more time to prepare them before this activity.
Are these activities from the input with the graphic organizer and then some of these students, could it possibly take place over multiple lessons and multiple days?
Exactly. Yeah. I love to recycle these lessons. If they talk with a partner, maybe switch partners and talk to somebody else. If you do it over multiple days, you'll find that the students, eventually they require less and less support with the graphic organizer. And remember, the goal is then to take the graphic organizer away and they can just be able to talk about it.
Great. And we have a question about assessment from Atta, Ismat, and Merv. We have a lot of different questions. All similar though. How would you assess this activity?
Yeah, great. So if we go to the next slide, this is how I would generally assess something like this. I have a blank sheet of paper, and there's space for students to draw the diagram and space for students to write. And so I get a lot of assessment going around and listening to students with their speaking. But if I want to physically document something, I usually do that through writing. And so students can draw their diagram, they can label it if they want, and then I have them write out a description of the different positions and why we have the seasons. And again, this is something you could model with students, but by the time it's time to assess, you just give them that paper and have them write it out, and then you can collect it, and it makes a quick and easy assessment. And it's really linked to all of the classroom activities that you've done.
Great. One other quick question before we move on from Lulia. She's asking, what if you don't know that much about the content? What about a teacher who doesn't, I think maybe what she's getting at is, what if you're asked to teach a subject like earth science, for example, that you don't know a lot about? What do you do in that type of situation?
That's a great question. You know, one of the things that I think is if you have access to the internet, getting on the internet and doing some research yourself, that's what I've always done, is very, very helpful. For me, I usually try to find a content teacher who has a website that I can go to and get ideas for activities, and also learn myself before I teach it. But probably the best way to do it is to try to find somebody in your school, somebody who is a science teacher or somebody who teaches that content area, and they can be a good resource for you.
Great. Thanks for those suggestions.
That's a good question, though. That's tough for people. It's tough for me. So as always, we have limitations. And so very quickly, looking at this diagram, two things that I think about are inaccuracies. So if some of you may have predicted this, but Earth is a lot smaller compared to the sun.
Right. So it might be, so it might be a little bit misleading.
Yeah, it might be a little bit misleading. That's something that you want to talk with students, right? And that's a different objective, right? And a different lesson, but it's a limitation to this graphic organizer. So it's important to know, right? Another one is complexity, the degree of complexity, right? So how specific do you want to go, right? Here we have the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, and those are getting more detailed into how sun hits the earth. So again, this is just to help us know that there are limitations on a diagram and on a piece of paper, and these are things that we might want to explain to students depending on what our goals are for them.
Great.
All right, so we're going to move into our final example. So some of you may teach in higher ed. I taught in an intensive English program at a university. And so this is maybe with more advanced students, and you can still use graphic organizers. So let's look at our higher ed example. So one of the things that's really important, I think at the university level, especially in the United States, I know, is that students can take an opinion on something, and that they can defend themselves, giving evidence and reasoning in an organized way. And so I know depending where you're from, organization looks different. So a lot of my students really struggled with having an organized classroom discussion or an organized paper. And so this is something that was really important to focus on. So here we get now this is our end goal. Now we get the content and language objectives. So my content objectives, right? Take a position, give evidence and reasoning, and then refute counterclaims. Now, what I mean by counterclaims, right, is if I have an opinion, somebody else has a different opinion, how do I show them maybe that my opinion is right and their opinion is wrong? Okay. Now, this takes me over to the language objectives. So providing a coherent organization of ideas, using appropriate transition words, and speaking diplomatically, right? So if that counterclaim sounded a little bit harsh, right? How do I tell someone that their opinion is wrong in a respectful way? Or how do I disagree with somebody in a way that's respectful and just honors their opinion, even though I don't agree with it or I have a different opinion? So these are big ideas and tough topics for students, I think. So what graphic organizer am I going to use? So what I want you to focus on in this example is how I group students. So if you remember from the beginning of the session, we talked about street art, right? We looked at that definition, and you may be familiar with the art visual there on the right. But basically, I gave my students a question, okay? Graffiti, which is a word for public artwork or public words on a wall. Is it vandalism or something negative? Or is it art, something positive, something beautiful? And what I did is I divided my class into two sides, right? Group 1 and 2. Group 1 took the graphic organizer. So each of my students, I gave it to all my students, they took that graphic organizer and they worked together. In group 2, they worked with their graphic organizer. And in this case, I had them read an article that presented both sides, vandalism and art. And I had them take notes using the graphic organizer. So let's see what they wrote down. So if we look closer at this graphic organizer, right? This is one that you might find I found it on Google. It's more of a common graphic organizer. I didn't invent it. But it starts by making a claim, right? So my claim here, street art is positive for communities. And then I have a spot to give 2 reasons. Okay, reason 1, it educates people on important issues, and it makes spaces beautiful and attractive. 2 reasons that these students, they found these reasons in the article. Some evidence for this, well, it often contains a social message, right? So social messages are important issues. And then on the right, instead of dull walls, you get beautiful paintings. Okay, now a counterclaim might be, well, when there's writing on walls, property values go down. It wrecks the building. But my refutation to that is actually, when a community looks beautiful from the outside, it brings in more tourism, so more money for business. And then finally, a closing statement, street art is positive for communities. So these are, again, the notes that students wrote down from their reading. A next step for me is I might check in with both groups to see if they have, if their ideas are on track or if there's something that needs some correction. So I'll walk around the class and check in with both groups. Once we have a good understanding of it, then we'll move on to the activities. So this is where I think it's really good to do a classroom debate. So I might, as a teacher, I'll facilitate this with my students. And if you do it once, the first time it's going to take a little bit longer. If you do it again, then students become more familiar with it. But we're kind of jumping back from the left side to the right side. So I'll just start you off with the process here. So the first group, I'll have them choose a representative and they present their opening claim, right? What's their opinion? Then we go to the second group. I'll have a representative choose their, or a student choose or present their claim or their opening statement. Then we go back to the vandalism group, right? So then I'll have a different person state the reasons. So as a teacher, I'm being more directive. I'm helping students. If a student doesn't know, other students can help. I can help as the teacher. So I'm basically walking them through this debate and teaching them how to present this argument in an organized way.
Great. And the other thing I really like about this process is that graphic organizer that you shared with us really helps set students up to be successful in this debate activity that they're going to do. They already have all of their ideas right there. Maybe there's some time to practice with those graphic organizers, and then they can go right into the debate, and they have sort of the tools that they need to be successful there. So another great example of scaffolding.
Right, and you bring up a good point. The students, they support each other. So that's another way we can scaffold, right? If there's a student in the group that's really picking it up, that student can help other people in the group too. And again, the graphic organizer is giving that visual to help them know what they're looking for and know how to talk about it. So good, yeah, that's exactly right. Once we've done it as a class, and this might take a whole class period, then what I would do if there's time or in a future lesson, I would switch to a partner debate, right? So now the debate is, the whole responsibility is on that one student, but they're in a partnered group. So they're not doing it in front of the whole class. They're not arguing or presenting their argument or debate in front of the whole class, but they're doing it with partners throughout the class. And this gives good students another good practice opportunity now to be more responsible for their side of the debate with the partner. Remember, in the whole class activity, there was a lot of probably observation of the students going on. And now they're active, right? Because everybody is in a partnered group. But it's the same thing. You could do the same debate, or now you could do another debate now that they're familiar with how it goes. And then finally, like all good speaking activities, it segues really nice into a writing activity. And so here, I would maybe go over an argumentative writing essay with my students. This process can take 2 weeks. And so it's something that you would do over the course of many different lessons. But my point is that they could use the same graphic organizer to support their writing. Yeah, so two different options, right? We can do the same topic of the debate, or they can choose a new topic. Okay. And just like any other graphic organizer, right, here we have limitations. In this specific case, I think one of our limitations is, what about a third option, right? What about street art that's serving as an advertisement just to make money? Mm-hmm. So whenever we present an either or, it's usually not like that. There's usually, there's more opinions than just two. And so that's something that maybe you'll run into with your students. All right, everyone. So that brings us to the end of our session. So my hope for you today was to look at really 3 examples of content-based English instruction, right? Through a thematic unit, content areas, and then also a higher ed example. And what I really hope that you take away through these is that it's important to start with the end goal in mind when you're trying to pick or choose or design your graphic organizer. And then to make sure that you incorporate that graphic organizer throughout your lessons, right? It's a good support from the beginning to the end, as well as with all 4 language skills, you can use it. And then lastly, just make sure you give your students time to practice. In all of these examples, I think we can see the teacher starting off by giving a lot of support and then taking away those supports as students became more and more confident with the content and also with the language.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm seeing so many really great comments with educators expressing how much they enjoyed this session and how they're going to be able to use it in their classrooms moving forward. So thank you so much, Eric, for that really great and practical session on using graphic organizers to promote academic language.
Great, everyone. Thanks so much.